thank you everyone for being here. This is a topic that really needs for citizens to begin to speak up and to express their concerns and their interests. My name is Mitch Trachtenberg, and I'm here to bring you good news from Humboldt County about election integrity. I'm a non-felon, for starters. I'm also a volunteer with Humboldt County's Election Transparency Project, and I'm the creator of some open source vote counting software. I'm sure there are others as well. And I feel awkward being the one person from the Transparency Project that's doing these talks. So let me just make some acknowledgments right up front. First of all, it's not really about the software. It's about the access to the ballots. And the access to the ballots is made possible by our Registrar of Voters. So Carolyn Cernich is the Humboldt County Clerk and Registrar of Voters, and she is one of us. She is a volunteer with the Election Transparency Project as well as playing these roles. She does scanning as well. And it's really through her that we've been able to do this project, because she's the one with the keys to the kingdom. Kevin Collins is a commercial fisherman in Humboldt County, and Kevin Collins approached Carolyn Cernich a couple of years ago and said, how come we don't get to look at our ballots? How come we can't count them ourselves? She said, I don't know. And that was the start of the Transparency Project. She decided that we should have the right to look at the ballots ourselves, and they began setting about looking for ways to technically accomplish that. Tom Pinto is another very active volunteer. He's with the District Attorney's Office, and there are many people who come in for scanning ballots as volunteers. This will be the first election during which people will actually get paid for scanning ballots. Until now, it's been entirely out of people's sense of citizenship. I'd also like to thank Lori Grace of the Grace Institute for Democracy and Election Integrity for making it possible for me to come down, and she's making it possible for me to do this sort of presentation in various places. So a couple of key points to start off with. Everybody believes in a secret ballot. Everybody wants for ballots to be cast in secret, and there's no question that we all agree with that. But after the ballots are cast in secret, and after they can no longer be traced back to someone, they should be public documents, and they should be countable by anyone. There's no reason to keep them hidden. The technique that we've used to enable anyone to scan ballots, anyone to count ballots rather, is to scan them. We use a commercial scanner. We generate the image files that are necessary, and we put them on the internet for people to count themselves, or you can get them on a DVD from the elections office. Now, let's talk about why it's important to have redundant counting. Think for a second about hand counting. Imagine that what you were doing was having all of the ballots in your election hand counted. Let's think about this approach. Let's go find the most respected judge in the county, Judge Jones. And we're going to hand all the ballots over to Judge Jones, and we're going to ask her to count them. And Judge Jones is going to go off into an office somewhere, and Judge Jones, very, very respected, is going to count the ballots and determine the vote, and is going to say to us 472,000 for so-and-so, and only 471,000 for thus and such, and that's the result. How many of us would be happy with that? It's not sensible. You don't want one person counting the ballots. It doesn't matter how respected they are. You want a check against that person. You want to make sure that somebody else, maybe with different interests than Judge Jones, is looking. That's not a challenge to Judge Jones's integrity. That's Ronald Reagan. I mean, trust but verify. You want to make sure that there are at least two sets of eyes on those ballots. Well, it should be the same thing with computers. Right now, the approach that we've been using is to try to develop this incredibly secure computer system and put all of our trust into that incredibly secure system. Some people think it's really secure, some people think it's not so secure, but either way, we're putting all of our trust into that system. And as far back as 1975, in a key paper that was written back then by Royce Saltman, at the dawn of computers in voting, it was just assumed that there would not be one computer doing the counting. It was assumed that you'd have two different computers under the control of two different elected officials doing the counting. Because redundancy is not a shocking concept. Redundancy is something that we all understand the importance of. When we fly, we want our airplanes to have redundant instrumentation. So if one altimeter goes bad, at the very least, you can look at the other one and see, well, wait a minute, I'm getting different results from these. There must be a problem. In a mission-critical situation, an engineer will insist that there be three instruments, three copies, so that if one of them goes bad, the other two will still be consistent, and the one that doesn't agree is shut down for repair. So redundancy is something that we understand. It seems everywhere, except in machine voting. Our solution to enabling the redundant counting is to scan the ballots, make the scans available, and then I've written some open source software that just counts the votes off those scans. You don't have to use my software. Anyone can write software that will count votes off the scans, but I just wanted to make sure that at least one such item existed. But this is the sort of project that could be done by a computer science class as a project. It's not enormously difficult. Now, I think there are a lot of very talented and very good computer science people who are working on the wrong problem. They are trying to develop an ultra-secure system that will leave computer scientists convinced that the vote was counted without fraud and accurately. And they're sort of assuming that once the computer scientists are convinced, they can announce to the world that the votes are being counted properly and everybody should be happy. And that's the wrong problem. What we need is for everybody to understand what's happening. The counting system needs not to be totally secure, but to be redundant and simple, so that anybody can look at it and realize for themselves, well, they did this and this and this. Makes sense, so I trust the vote. No magic, no reliance on experts. And it sometimes seems that the computer science people are much more interested in the more complicated solutions, in trying to create an ultra-secure system. You can create it, it can be ultra-secure, it can be the best thing since sliced bread. Maybe nobody will ever break it, but how will we know? How will we know? Redundancy offers us an opportunity to see, right, this one said this one also says this, it's okay. The Transparency Project is really about the first three steps of this, and then I wrote software to enable the 4, 5, and 6. But the first thing is just run the ballots through a regular, common, commercial office scanner. And ideally, you can have a printer on that scanner, so that as each ballot goes into the scanner, it gets a serial number printed on it. Then take the images that you have from the scanner and save those images to a disk, a CD or DVD. But as you save them to disk, to ensure that the images can be confirmed to not be altered, you can go through a process called digital signing. And digital signing is not like when you go into a Kmart and sign on one of those little screens. Digital signing is a cryptographic technique that ensures that a signature will not validate against a particular data file if that data file even has one bit altered in it. And the American Bar Association says that digital signatures are more reliable than paper signatures. So it's completely approved as a way of ensuring that something hasn't been altered. What this system does is you have the images, you have the extracted data from the images, and you have the final results. And you can go back and check each of those things against the other. Now, how is it possible to do this? It was possible to do this because most of it already exists. And most of it, or all of it, is free. It's out there, it's available. This is all built on a platform of what's called open source software. And open source software exists in all of these areas. Basically, you have an operating system that you can replace Microsoft Windows with. Actually, what's running on this computer now is Linux, not Windows. So you have Linux. Digital signing is out there for free in a program called GPG, GNU Privacy Guard. Scanning capability is out there in a protocol called SANE. Optical character recognition. This program was developed by HP Labs, but they decided they couldn't make money on it, so they released it into the public domain. It's called Tesseract. It's free. The language to write the programs in is Python. It's free. It's available. The image processing, PIL, Python Image Library, is out there, available, free. Spreadsheet, OpenOffice, out there, available, free. And if you wanted to import it into a database, then there are at least 2 free databases that have full support for the standard database language, SQL, structured query language. So all of that exists. And so I took all of that and I modestly named it the Trachtenberg Election Verification System. What TEBS actually does is it adds a little bit of ballot processing, but for the most part it's glue that connects all of this stuff that already existed. And I won't bother to show you what it looks like to scan stuff in, and the extraction of the data is not particularly interesting to watch. But once you've done all of that for an election, you can go and say, go to any ballot number and bring it up and take a look at what the software calculated as the results on that ballot. So what you're seeing here is ballot 259. And as I said, as they go into the scanner, they get a serial number printed on them. So if you're not sure, let's zoom this out a little bit. And here's your 00259 serial number. So that's the one. And what it's saying, I think you can see that there's a green fringe around these boxes. That green fringe is telling you the area that it thought the vote target was at. And this blue is telling you what was OCR'd off the template. It's telling you that it thinks this green vote target is about Lawrence Larry Naratelli, and I can hide that for a moment so we can look at the underlying ballot. So I'll say, let's not see that, and there it is on the ballot, Lawrence Larry Naratelli. Let me put those back. And when something's dark enough, it just shows it in red. So you could imagine taking this system or some system like it and scanning ballots in an auditorium, and the extraction is instant. So this can be running just a ballot or 2 behind the ballots that you're scanning in. And this could be projected up on a screen. And if you wanted, you could have 20 people where 2 of them were counting governor, 2 of them were counting lieutenant governor, 2 of them were counting insurance commissioner, and they could do their own counts. And they could say, well, I agree with the software on this one, and this one, and this one, but wait a minute, not on this one. Or you can just rely on the software. I mean, it's up to you. There have been concerns raised about this, and I'm putting these up not just because I love arguing, though I do, but I'm putting this up because I want you to understand that we're aware of the concerns and we have responses to them. That's not to say that the concerns aren't real. The concerns are in many cases very valid. The strongest concern that people have with this system is you lose what's called strong privacy, or what I've called here enforced privacy. Imagine that you have a wife who's abused by her husband, and the husband says to the wife, "You'd better vote this way, and I'm going to, you'd better vote this way, and I'm going to be able to check, because what I want you to do is fill in the top half of this vote and the bottom half of this vote, and then I want you to put a little dot just to the left." Okay? Well, with private ballots, with those ballots not being exposed, that's no risk. But with a system like this, particularly if it's out on the internet, there's a risk that husband could go through all the ballots and find that, and if it doesn't find it, then the wife's in trouble. Well, that's a very legitimate argument. That's a very legitimate concern. Here's the thing, though. It's also a concern about vote by mail, because that husband could just tell the wife, "Give me your ballot," and now you have to sign it, and I've filled it out. So vote by mail has introduced a real problem with respect to enforced privacy. It has introduced room for people to extort votes, for people to sell votes, and that's real. And that's a huge hole. This introduces the exact same hole, just a teensy bit. So since we've already gone to vote by mail in California, there's simply no reason to worry about this unless we're planning on going back from vote by mail. That's never going to happen. Once it's out of the bag, it's out of the bag. So I think vote by mail is the answer to this first concern. Then there's a lot of election law, a lot of voting law that is simply ambiguous. And it would be really helpful if it were cleared up whether or not you're allowed to print numbers on ballots. But, you know, sometimes people who don't want to do something will find any excuse not to do it. And so they'll use an argument like, well, I'm not sure we're allowed to print on. Well, okay, don't print on the ballots then. Okay, instead of printing numbers on each ballot, then every 25th ballot, put in a blank sheet and just print the number on that and keep the ballots in the same sequence so you can still get back to the paper. I mean, the thing is, the slightest amount of thought will show that some of these problems are not real, and yet you're going to hear them. You're going to hear them cited as, oh, we can't do it. And when you hear those problems cited, it very often means, please don't bother me. I know what I'm doing, you know. Cost. We're in very tough times right now, but the software is free. You can use regular commercial scanners, and you can do this on laptops. You can even do this on a netbook. It would be a little bit slow, but it would probably still be as fast as the scanner. So the cost, it's true, it's not zero, but it's negligible if you truly have an interest in doing this. You can make it happen. And then here's one that always comes up. What if the second count is wrong and the first count was right? Why cause ourselves all that trouble? Well, that's true, it's true. It's very possible. In fact, that was our assumption the first time when we came up with those additional 200 ballots. We figured we'd blown it, not that the original commercial system had blown it. If the second count is wrong repeatedly, you're probably going to stop doing this, or at least you're not going to do it with that system. So that's a problem that will go right away. But it's the wrong question. The question that you should be asking is not what if the second count is wrong. The question you should be asking is, what if the first count is wrong? Right now, there's no way to find that out. Because while the second count gives you these images with numbers on them and shows you how those images connect to spreadsheets that you can look at and shows you how those spreadsheets calculate up to a vote count, the original system says there were 272,519 votes for John Jones. Believe it. Believe it.